Welcome to those people online joining us for what will be the first of a number of webinars on the move to NPP. I'm Adrian Loveney from Australian Payments Plus. AP Plus and the industry have a comprehensive program of activities underway to support the ongoing movement of volume towards fast, data-rich, modern payments infrastructure, and I'm really pleased to facilitate a discussion with our panel members here today. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal as custodians of the land on which we're meeting today, at least where we are in Sydney, and also acknowledge custodians from wherever you're joining us from today also. Firstly, I'd like to introduce our guests here today. My colleague Katrina Stewart, who is the executive sponsor of the Move to NPP program within AP Plus, and Katrina will be shortly giving a brief presentation to set the scene for our discussion. Lisa Vasic is the Managing Director of Transaction Banking for ANZ Bank, who will be able to give us great insights about what Australian businesses and corporates are looking forward to on this journey. And finally, Matt Lewis, who is the Managing Director of CapabilityWise, but is also a Director of DSPANs, which is the Digital Service Providers of Australia and New Zealand, and particularly works closely with key government agencies on their digital transformation journey. We're really interested in hearing your questions of our panellists, and we'll do our best to feed those into the discussion, which will be kicking off shortly. So please ask your questions in the chat, and then we'll take the opportunity to answer as many of those as we can as we go through the panel today. Those that we don't get a chance to answer, we'll provide some answers to those and circulate those to people who are attending along with the link to this recording. Firstly, and before I hand over to Katrina, Australian Payments Plus was created bringing together three of Australia's domestic payments companies, BPay Group, FPOS and NPP Australia, into one organisation to shape the future of payments in Australia. We're here today particularly in the context of our work supporting the move to NPP, which is one of the largest and certainly the most strategically important projects for AP Plus. Katrina, over to you.
Thanks, Adrian. So we wanted to just start with a little bit of an overview of the NPP, which is our real-time payments infrastructure that was intentionally designed around four key features. The fact that it supported fast payments in real time, that it's always on 24/7, the data-rich capability that enables more information to be carried through with the payment, and then also the simpler addressing by being able to use a pay ID such as an email or a phone number to address payments to bank accounts. So where are we now that the NPP has been up and running for close to 8 years? We did about 1.3 billion transactions in 2023. And we see about 140 million transactions per month with an average payment value on a daily basis of $5 billion. We now have over 114 million accounts that are reachable to make and receive NPP payments, and 23 million pay IDs are registered in the market. And the largest transaction that we have seen go across the platform was for $40 billion. Sometimes people try to correct me, say that's million. No, that was actually billion, and not surprisingly, that was a government payment. As we kind of think about what's happening in the marketplace and the drive towards modernisation of our payment system, there's really kind of a number of key areas driving that. One is from a government perspective in terms of how do we move towards greater digitisation of the Australian economy, and that includes payments within that as well. Consumers are expecting payments to be available, to be fast, to be safe and convenient. From a business perspective, we're seeing a drive towards how do we have greater integration of payments into those business processes that will result in efficiencies. And from a financial institution perspective, how do we rationalise some of the payment systems that we have today and try and reduce the cost of maintaining the legacy system and bring that together onto the NPP. So as we think about the target date for decommissioning the legacy infrastructure, we're working, as Adrian mentioned, on a program of work to see how we move those volumes across by 2030 as that target date. So how do we work with industry and others to bring those volumes onto our real-time payments infrastructure? And we have in place a comprehensive program of work to achieve this, which really has a number of layers. So one is basically from an infrastructure perspective, what we need to do to get ready as it relates to the platform, how we're working with the financial institutions that participate in the NPP to ensure that they are ready from their perspective to work with their corporate customers and others to bring volumes across. And then finally, from a broader ecosystem perspective, how do we help that change management activity and build awareness and education across the industry and support what is basically a once in a lifetime generational change in terms of how payments are made here in Australia. And we're focusing on a number of really key areas. So from a capacity perspective, how do we make sure that the platform is ready to be able to support those increase in volumes? And today we can do about 2 times current volumes, but we're already planning for future capacity uplifts as well, with the requirement for the next uplift to be in place by end of 2025. Resilience is obviously a really key area of focus from an industry perspective. And how do we ensure that we work very closely with our participating financial institutions to make sure that we have the right resilience in place? And thinking also about contingency scenarios and recoverability as well, which is going to be increasingly important as we move to more digitisation. From an account reach perspective, as I mentioned, we have about 114 million accounts that are reachable. There are pockets of accounts that currently aren't reachable on the NPP, and we're working closely with the relevant financial institutions to address those gaps, which are predominantly in legacy account types or maybe account types that have very low transaction volumes. But we still need to work on how we're going to support customers that hold those accounts. From a payment type perspective, obviously ensuring that the platform is ready to support all different payment types. In particular, we are working with industry to look at how do we move across large bulk files that we see in the marketplace today, and how do they get most efficiently processed on the NPP. And then finally around kind of cost and value. So as we see more volume come across onto the platform, we anticipate that costs will come down as well. And we're really focused on how do we also ensure that people are clear on where the areas of value are from the NPP as well, because it's not just about a transaction cost, but it's also about where are there cost savings and efficiencies that can be unlocked from a business and a corporate perspective and from a government perspective. And so I'll just touch on some of those in terms of, where really are the key areas of benefit that the NPP can deliver. Obviously, there's the ability to move money anytime, 24/7. And certainly one of the things that we've heard from the marketplace is the fact that there's no cut-off times. I can make a payment if that's midnight on a Friday, if it's on a public holiday, has incredible benefit. How the NPP can support business efficiencies by the fact that we can incorporate additional data and really support and streamline the reconciliation process and unlock some of those efficiencies in the back office of businesses and corporates. How they can optimise cash management by enabling more efficient use of working capital and having real-time visibility of cash positions. Next is around certainty, and this is really one of the key areas that we've heard from a number of organisations. The fact that I actually have visibility to the payment status. I know immediately if a payment has been successful or not. I'm not having to wait 2 days to find that out. And what that means in terms of being able to be more efficient about processing those payments. Unlocking better customer experiences. So we've seen a number of organisations that have been able to really sort of reinvent the customer experience by using the NPP and what that means for their customers to surprise and delight them. And finally, having greater confidence in knowing that where money is going, where you think it's going to. The fact that we have Pay ID, but also working on a confirmation of payee solution with the industry that provides greater assurance that payments are going to the right place. And certainly what we've seen from research is 1 in 4 users of Pay ID have actually stopped a payment and made edits or not proceeded with that payment because they actually have that visibility. And when that translates into a business and a corporate environment, what sort of benefit that will unlock as well. And then sort of finally, we just wanted to touch on Payday Super as kind of an example of where we see broader change coming together with payments modernisation and what that means. So I'm sure a lot of you are aware that by July 2026, employers are required to pay employees their super at the same time as their pay, and that has 7 days to reach the super fund. And what we see by looking at using the NPP in order to meet those obligations means that we can see better, faster superannuation payments on the NPP. So the fact that we can have those real-time payments 24/7, the ability to carry relevant superannuation data together with the payment, the fact that actually we can utilise some of those validation capabilities of the platform to provide assurance that the payment's going to the right place before the payment is made. Having that certainty around the payment and where it's at in the process. The ability to use Pay2, our payment initiation service as well, and you might hear a little bit more about that in the panel discussion, to initiate those payments. And also the ability to have fast and efficient returns processing as well using the NPP. So, and we just wanted to call out that our next webinar in 2025 will be specifically drilling down into the topic of Payday Super, but we really see this as a way of how the NPP can support some of the broader pushes towards modernisation in the marketplace as well, and the role that it can play. So thank you, Adrian. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Katrina. And that was a great backgrounder, if you like, in terms of some of the benefits that NPP can offer. Particularly, I think the example of Payday Super is a really tangible example about how the NPP can support a government initiative that will benefit all Australians. Lisa, in your role leading transaction banking at ANZ, you obviously talk to a lot of business customers, and you've been involved in payments for some time now. How aware or interested do you think they are in terms of the move to NPP?
Well, we can't actually talk to businesses kind of one amorphous kind of grouping, because I think what we're seeing, first of all, if I can take a step back, is the new payments platform has been around for some time now. So really since 2017, 2018, we've been on a pathway of making sure our customers are educated around the use of real-time payments. And real-time payments is not an Australian thing. It's a global phenomenon that we're seeing playing out in various markets. If anything, the Asia-Pacific region itself is probably one of the leading regions with a real adoption of real-time payments infrastructure. We're seeing it playing out a little bit different in different geographies, whether it's New Zealand 7-day payments, which is a little bit of a hybrid structure, versus what we're seeing probably in Singapore and Hong Kong, and particularly some of the other Southeast Asian geographies. What it, though, is part of a bigger trend that all businesses are really trying to get their head around, is as we move much more to what we call a real-time economy. And this is where the real-time payments infrastructure plays a really important anchoring role for our customers around how do they compete, how do they stay relevant, how do they continue to provide services to their end customers, but also their ecosystem of suppliers and buyers in a world that expects things to happen in a near real-time way, because the payment infrastructure, particularly across this region, can facilitate that usage. So our customers are very aware, but they're also very conscious, particularly if I zone back into Australia, is we've had a domestic payment system that actually works really well. It's been well loved for a long period of time and has some features on it that actually working with the way that our customers' treasury systems operate, particularly in a batch-based world with cut-off times. And a lot of our customers' treasury management systems and enterprise resource planning systems have been configured to marry into that type of environment. So our customers are actually very aware about real-time payments and the fact that this is going to mean a change in the way that they operate. And I think also, Adrian, one of the things I will say is having the kind of the target date around the retirement and a well-due retirement of our beloved direct entry system, or our BEX system, after many years of faithfully serving Australia, is now gives our customers time to really think about not just how they switch to NPP, our real-time payments platform, but actually, we spoke about a little bit earlier, Katrina, about this is a transformation program. It's not a lift and shift. What we're really seeing is customers take a step back and start to think about, well, how does this transform the services that I need to provide? And that can mean a very different thing, whether you're sitting in treasury, whether you're sitting in customer experience, digital design, or product innovation.
Thanks. And we might come back to change management later on, I suspect. What do you think your customers are getting excited about? What benefits do you think that are they seeing that faster payments, data-rich payments, always-on payments are able to deliver their businesses?
It's choice is probably the first word that I will actually provide to our customers, because, again, whether they operate in business to consumer, business to business, business to government, they will have different needs, and different payment rails will give them choice about what the services they want to provide. And I think this is a really important thing with NPP. What it will do is, because it is based on the ISO 20022 format, what does that mean? It's much more data rich. And what that will help is our customers, particularly as we're all thinking about productivity, irrespective of which industry that we sit in a much more digitally orientated world, is having the ability to be able to consume that data to help us with business decisioning, and whether that's how we manage our liquidity, how we start to deal with the R word, which every treasurer and finance operation needs to be challenged with, which is reconciliation. How do we actually manage those type of things? And, again, I've said we've got this familiarity with cut-off times, with batch-based systems, but they're also a limitation on what we can do. If we think about how we move money up and through the region and across different time zones, they become points of friction. What our NPP does is actually provide us with the basis for actually being able to engage in a world economy which is real time. And one of the things, Adrian, if I can give a bit of a plug to AP Plus, is really thinking about and helping facilitate now the SWIFT into the real-time payments infrastructure for a lot of our correspondent banks. So we're already connecting Australia up to that 24/7 economy, which is, I think, a really impressive thing, and particularly that leadership we have had around real-time payments.
Thanks, Lisa. We've touched on a few topics there, including international payments. We might come back to that later on. Matt, if I can turn to you, if in terms of your role with DSPANs, DSPAN's members are a broad range of customers, and maybe you can tell us about who a few of them are. They provide a range of software services to business customers. What do you think some of the common pain points are that the NPP can help DSPAN's members and their customers start to tackle?
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. That's a good question. So let me start with what DSPANs is. It's Digital Service Providers Australia and New Zealand. So the first question that comes from that is, what is a digital service provider? It's basically people who create software for businesses. Right, so that ranges from your accounting products, invoicing tools, point of sale, through to payroll and superannuation, and any kind of software that supports a business to do their business. So we've got a broad range of members, from local startups through to the global powerhouses of Intuit and Xero and those kind of entities as well. And they obviously service a range of customers. And when we look at that customer base and go, what is real-time payments, or what does the new payment platform mean for those customers, we come up with some common needs. And it's often around those key business transactions around sale of goods or paying of staff. And the first one that comes up is, how do I know I'm paying the right person? Right. So business email compromise is a huge issue, both domestically here, but internationally. It's a multi-billion-dollar international problem. Right. So the ability to actually know that you're paying the right person and have that, that confirmation of payee capability, where I can go, yes, I'm going to pay, and I feel like I'm paying the right person. I can see the details. It matches what I expected. That's a huge thing for a small business. Alongside that is the certainty of outcome. Right, so I've got something I need to pay. I've got a supplier I need to pay, and I make my payment. And what happens? Right, we wait to see if it went through or if it failed, and I have to do something. So those kind of two things combined together are significant. And as Katrina kind of alluded to, we've got these broader economic digitalisation things that are occurring that are linked as well. One of the ones that I'm closely involved in and a consumer of as well is electronic invoicing. And as a small business owner, I had my best experience was the combination of e-invoicing and new payments platform together, where we issued an invoice to a customer and we had the funds for that invoice in our account within 30 minutes. So if you think about that in that time frame, the customers received the invoices, have done good receipting, and they've triggered a payment and the funds have settled inside 30 minutes. And from a small business point of view, the cash flow benefit and the certainty of outcome that comes with that is phenomenal. So, there's a whole range of problems that exist in the business world, but taking some of this challenge out of the payment space in terms of certainty is absolutely, a winner.
And Matt, you spend a lot of time, as I mentioned in the intro, working with government, working with DSPAN members to help support the digitisation of business processes. And we've talked about a few of them already, payday super, electronic invoicing. There's a lot of modernisation work that the ATO is driving in terms of how tax is collected and remitted between companies in the ecosystem. How do you see the NPP playing a supporting role towards that drive towards digitisation? I mean, I think we've been talking about this for a while now, but I'm not sure that the benefits have necessarily been obvious, at least.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting question. I think as a country, our progress towards digitisation is to be admired. We're doing well as a country. You look around, every business that you encounter throughout your day, there's an element of digitisation in that business, whether they're trading online or they've got an electronic point of sale. There's an element of digitisation in every business. So we're actually, as a country, starting right now from a really good point. Right? In terms of payments and our progress in that space, maybe it has been a bit slower than we all would have liked, particularly if you're in the space. And that's reflective of a few things. And Lisa touched on it before. We're the victim of our own success. Right? We've had a reliable payment system that's worked. And so the desire for change is something we actually have to create. Right? Because people will be comfortable with the status quo because the status quo works. And it's only when we start talking about things like Tax 3.0 or Payday Super where we actually go, whilst it works, it's not as good as it could be, right? And that ability to have near real-time payments creates a range of opportunities. And I think about what Lisa said, the words going through my head at that point in time were competitive advantage. We actually created a national competitive advantage by leveraging our payment rails and the new payments platform to accelerate the speed that money flows through our economy. So from a Tax 3.0 point of view, for those that don't know what that is, it's really about bringing a taxable event like a sale or a payroll event, the information that goes with that's then reported to the tax administration, and the payment of any liability. Those events are strung out across a sequence of time at the moment. You might sell something now, report GST quarterly, and then pay your liability a period after that. It's about bringing those three things together so that as the transaction happens in the economy, the information flows and then the payments happen at the same time in concert. And the only way we can really achieve that in terms of payday super and things like that is by having that money move rapidly through the economy and understanding exactly what's happened to that money. It has been delivered to the person I expected it to be delivered to.
And together with that data as well. I mean, I think
Absolutely.
There's a lot of focus on, yes, our current system works, but it's actually the unhappy path and what happens when you don't have the data together with the payment, and actually the efficiencies that can be brought when you bring those two together.
That's right. Lisa mentioned the dirty R word, reconciliation, right? Anyone who's used an accounting product and had to go through and reconcile bills and payments, no, it's a nightmare. But with NPP, you can include additional data that supports that straight through automated reconciliation. So having to deal with those administrative menial tasks is actually by exception, not the rule.
Katrina, you've been working around the NPP for as long as I have now. The early use cases that we saw were around speed, I think principally was the key benefit that consumers saw from the NPP. Do you think in the conversations that you are having now, people are beginning that the NPP is more than just about fast payments?
I think definitely. I mean, I think sometimes, it's more the response. People say, why do I need fast payments, but it's actually the NPP is so much more than that. I think what we've seen is organisations now talking about the fact that it's available 24/7, which also touches a bit on what Lisa said earlier. And that might also apply to, if I'm, say, in Perth and I don't need to sort of have everything done by 3 o'clock anymore. But if I have a critical payment that I need to get made, I can use the NPP any time of any day to get that payment made. It's around the payment certainty. It's actually having visibility and transparency to what's happened to a payment. And I think it is also about the value of that information that I can get and what I do with that. And we're also seeing increasingly organisations move towards, say, APIs in order to really benefit from some of that, and moving away from some of the sort of typical ways that businesses made payments using files, actually switching to more modern methods and then realising the benefits that come from that.
I think you're spot on. If you can take the human hands out of those processes, then things just happen, right? And then we intervene where we need to intervene, not as a matter of course.
Absolutely, yeah.
Matt, there were a group of DSPAN's members spent some time with banks a few weeks ago at the AP Plus offices talking about the sorts of opportunities that were available as we move through this change journey. What were some of the most interesting things or the kind of insights that you heard in that room?
Good question. Look, so there are a huge range of opportunities. I think might start with some of the concerns, actually. I'm going to flip that around a little bit. I guess some of the concerns are around how, particularly in the payday super context, how we deal with batch, right? Because we've come from this legacy world where we pay super and we're paying however many employees we've got for however many pay periods occur during that time, we'll issue a batch payment, right? And we think of that as easy now, right? Now we might have to have human hands in that and do some things. The concern from the group was how effective and mature are the batch capabilities in NPP, and what's the price point, right? They're pretty obvious concerns that you would expect. I think the flip side of that, though, is to look at the graph we saw earlier around how NPP has grown over time and what that means for pricing, right? The more transactions you have, the better the price.
Yep.
Right? And if those things are happening in real time and your batch fails, well, maybe your batch doesn't fail anymore. Maybe one transaction out of that fails, and the rework you have to do because of that is just for one small slice. So there are a number of things like that where you actually think, we start off thinking that we've got a concern about something, but actually it's an opportunity wrapped up in fear and uncertainty.
If I can just add to that too, because it's interesting, one of the things we identified, again, the important thing is listening to our customers, and one of the with their treasury processes, batch is a core part. The last thing a financial controller or treasurer wants is a one-for-one transactions on there. So we've, one of the things we've had to do is develop what we call a single debit multi-credit proposition to be able to bridge, and this is what I call what's going to be really important over these next 5 years, is we're going to have bridge services, but also some of these things actually will need to be part of the landscape because they're actually well loved in terms of actually how our businesses operate. So, I think about this kind of next 5 years, given we're almost on the tip of 2025, which is frightening, and 2030 doesn't sound that far away, but is how we really start to explore these use cases for NPP and what does it mean in a treasury context? And it means something quite different than it does in a product designer for our customers. And if I can use the insurance segment, who wants to use it for claims processing, because in a disaster, we value our insurance the most when we can get that claim into our hands to repair the damage after a storm. So they've already been using NPP for some time now and part of that claims processing piece. And that's all about creating a wonderful customer experience piece here, which is a combination of the addressing issue that Katrina talked about, but also around that speed in terms of the urgency in that time of need for an insured party. But I think this is a bit too is where, how we continue to have these conversations. We work with our business customers to think about this is not just about what I used direct entry yesterday. Today I'm now using NPP and everything else remains the same. But it's about how do I think about those use cases that are going to really help my business, really adopt and adapt to the world of a really digitized world, but also around how am I going to get those productivity elements coming out of it through automating reconciliation through being able to manage my liquidity better. And Matt, you talked about cash flow, and it's interesting. I might digress for a little second, Adrian, you can get me back on track. We did a lot of research about Pay2, which is the kind of the next overlay service using the real-time payments infrastructure. And we had a little bias, and our presumption was it's going to be such a great consumer experience for our billers out to their consumers that's probably one of the key reasons they want to deliver and embrace Pay2. When we spoke to customers, and this was whether they were small business, mid-market, or in the more in the corporate institutional space, two common terms really came out. One, it supports my cash flow, and two, reconciliation. Is the fact that it's atomic reconciliation were two really big draw cards for customers thinking about Pay2. We weren't wrong without the benefit of the consumer experience piece, but it was an and piece. So I think, the basics which have always been there for every business. How do I run a much more productive business? How do I get certainty over my liquidity and my cash flow position? How do I engage with my suppliers and buyers and my customers to have good propositions? Because they're parts of a broader service. Those all remain true. Just the way they're going to get delivered using the real-time payments trail is going to transform because we have more choice as part of the infrastructure.
And you've got a number of different products in the market, Lisa. I was going to kind of draw out you can accept payments from your corporates via API. You've also more recently launched a kind of product to accept payments in bulk form. How do you help your customers to navigate between the various choices that are available for them and support them as they start to think about the capabilities that the NPP will offer them?
Yeah, and this is a really important part. I think as an industry, this is about education first and foremost. And as much as we love payments, our customers have businesses to run. So what we've got to really frame this for our customers is actually what does this mean for their business, and whether the objective is one of enhancing their liquidity, enhancing their productivity, reducing risk. And we talk about that from the reconciliation, the confirmation of payee piece. And that is so important. Unfortunately, this is peak season for business email compromise and phishing attacks. So for all of our customers out there, please be extra careful during this time of year. Our AP people are our first line of defence, or our accounts payable team. So we've just, got to have that not zero trust hat on as we go into this kind of period about any account changes. But it's all of those elements that we kind of really need to stack up in, and we need to educate our customers. And then, like any good business, it needs to plan. And now by having 2030 as a date, we can sit down with our customers and work through the plan of actually how they're going to adopt and morph their business processes to be take the ability of actually having real time, and that's real time when they choose real time. They use the same rails to have delayed payments when they want to have delayed payments in terms of intraday batch type processes. So Adrian, I think it's really important. We can't underestimate as an industry. We need to continue this conversation. It needs to get more prominent as we start to near on that 5-year time frame. And again, it's working with our customers to help them plan for this change, understand where it is a like for like, but actually where it's a genuine productivity consumer benefit around how they change their business processes. But, for us payment nerds, it is a bit of a fun time because, this is really about setting up the foundations that really support, that digital economy, which was what the RBA wanted when it did its paper many, many years ago, to be able to really support Australia being a competitive country in a much more global world.
And I think that's a really important point, Lisa, around actually that migration pathway is going to look different for different organisations. And, some might think about payments out first, maybe, or might think about payments in, or maybe how do I start to accept payments using Pay2 for kind of new payments first and then look at my back book. And it's really thinking about that sequencing and what that journey looks like. And where are going to be some of those benefits that will come first that then kind of creates that pathway for them. And I think, helping customers and organisations on that journey, and certainly, we're very keen to sort of, see how we can help people learn from other people's experience as well in terms of what that look like will be, I think, really important as we move forward.
And Katrina, I couldn't echo that any more loud. Sorry, Matt, any more louder. But we always kind of talk about everyone wants to be paid in real time. but everyone wants a choice of paying in real time. And I think, again, that comes back down to that choice piece. But I generally do think that this conversation around how to, and Matt, your business is really important because this is a component part of a broader story around digitisation. It's not a story in and of itself. And so then being able to context this in what our customers are wanting to do as part of their broader digitisation programs is really important. And if I can just add one little kind of commentary, again, with Pay2, we're quite excited about Pay2 because it's really one of the genuine benefits we're seeing about the broad investment into the real-time payment rails. For those of you not familiar with it, it's a request to pay service using the real-time payments infrastructure, and it puts control in the hands of the end consumer about managing those payments, and it provides absolute visibility and zero reconciliation for our big billers. So it's a genuine win-win on both sides of the equation. But what's really interesting, a lot of the discussion initially was around a replacement for a direct debit. What we're seeing because of this digitisation journey is a lot of the use cases around Pay2 are actually outside of that use case of direct debit. That'll be something that will come in time as we get nearer to the decommissioning of direct entry, because it kind of works. But where direct debit hasn't been able to work, or where customers have got new business models and more of them are coming through digital business models, Pay2 can play a really important pathway to, supporting account-to-account payments, which we are seeing, and all the global trends and statistics tell us this is a real growth path, because we know the younger generation is account-to-account is their native form of the way they make payments versus probably my generation, which was a combination of that and kind of credit card. So it's really important around having a payment pathway that actually is really inclusive for all the different kind of cohorts across our customer base, and providing something that's safe and secure for both parties.
Thanks, Lisa. You should have a job selling payments.
But it's exciting. It's all about change, and it's exciting.
Yes, but I think that the 2030 date is something that people still look at and go, that's a fair way off, right? That's next decade. The reality is that 2025 needs to be the year of understanding the impact on your business and making change, right? I think if you're having the conversations in 26, 27 around how will this impact us, what are we going to do, you're too late, right? The core capabilities are there right now. They're available to use and they're stable and reliable. So the sooner you start those conversations about how will this change my business, how will this change our operations, the better. Right, and Payday Super will be one of those catalysts that trigger that and trigger some of those deep conversations about how the ecosystem works across 2025. But there are others to come as well. And if you're sitting there looking at this and going 2030, yeah, we'll get to that. You need to start thinking about we'll get to that in January.
So can you tell us more about that? I mean, I think we've heard about the importance of the date. I think Lisa's talked to us about listening to customers and supporting them where they are in the journey. Another driver for change is going to be government and regulations. So we've talked about Payday Super. What are some of the other big kind of changes that are going to introduce change into the ecosystem? Well,
I'm not going to talk to policy specifics because I know we've got an election coming and other things like that will, we'll hear lots of ideas across the next 12 months. Let's be honest about that. But if we look globally, and like I said, I work in the taxation space frequently, it's all about something happened right now. Money moves, right? We look at digital platforms overseas that are selling things on behalf of businesses or individuals, collecting the GST and remitting that on behalf of the taxpayer, right? Those are kind of some of the international trends that we're seeing around that space. We're obviously seeing massive growth online, and we're seeing tax obligations for businesses that span borders, right? I sell something to a customer in Europe, then I might have an obligation somewhere in Europe. And as a small business, that's not something that's necessarily well understood. So it's our role as service providers in the community to educate, right, and to explore how we can best provide services to solve those true digital economy problems. But the trends are definitely about making sure that people are accounting for their liabilities as soon as possible so they don't find themselves in a cash flow crisis further down the track where they didn't forecast appropriately.
So we might just finish with a couple of questions to each of you around how we can best help businesses to start to navigate this change journey. But there's a really interesting question from one of the people watching, and I might put this one to you, Katrina. The graph that you shared demonstrating NPP growth, which is about 1.3 billion transactions last year, didn't really show a corresponding decrease in direct credit volumes or direct debit volumes. So is the NPP just generating new transactions? Where are they coming from, do you think?
It's a great question, and one that we have spent some time debating in terms of the answer to that. We think there's probably been a number of different sources. One has definitely been substitution from, say, maybe rather than using cash or card, I'm now using the NPP. We think also there's been an increased velocity of transactions that have happened by the fact that the NPP is fast and it's always available. I might be making more payments more frequently. I certainly find myself paying my eldest daughter very frequently using the NPP, whereas maybe in the past I might have just done that with less frequency. I think also kind of a bit of a disaggregation of payments in terms of who's involved in that payment flow and what that results in terms of number of transactions that we see coming across the NPP, and particularly with Pay2, because you've now got kind of the payment initiation leg and then also in terms of the payment itself. And then there has been some kind of migration as well. Particularly we know that a lot of the sort of pay anyone payments that typically if I was making them in my banking channel, they would go through direct entry. Now they go across the NPP. So we think there's a number of reasons that have kind of been behind that graph that we've seen.
Interesting. It is a conundrum that we've reflected on a little bit. So Lisa, maybe kind of last question to you before we're going to get you to make a closing observation. How are you working with your customers to help them to get ready for this journey?
Absolutely. And that's really us having those conversations that Matt was talking about, is in that planning process. And we're doing that right across the value stream. We are doing what AP Plus does. We run a lot of webinars with our customers. We are just trying to keep that awareness. So interesting, we have a survey that covers our part of the market, and we've asked the survey to test customers about their knowledge around real-time payments. And that's a really important piece, because this isn't on the top of the agenda for many of our customers. And to, Katrina, your point around substitution, a lot of customers will just think it's a payment. It's not, is it a real-time payment? Is it an old direct entry payment? They will just expect it's a payment. It should be fast. It should get there with the right information. It should be able to help fulfill the need of the underlying service. So I think this is a bit where we've just got to help our customers with that planning process, and that's what we are actively working on. As a bank and a key bank in the system, what we're also doing is listening to our customers about those on-off rails. So some of those features, we talked about the batch processing, which we call single debit, multi-credit. And then again, one little shared story is in a world which is more and more 24/7, we're seeing a lot of our customers use NPP as their business continuity plan. So they may still be using today the batch processing using direct entry, but if they have an outage or they have a gap, they will want to know that my bank can pick that up, convert it into the real-time payment rails, and get that out on a Friday night so that my employees can get their salaries and not impacted by any challenges I've had in my environment. So not just thinking about the positive change and the new customer experiences, but thinking about it from a contingency perspective as well. And so what we're trying to do is we're doing this by storytelling. What are the use cases? And then working with our customers on what makes sense for them, what their journey is around the pathway. But importantly, our role as a participant in this broad industry is making sure we've got the capabilities to be able to support our customers engage in a real-time payment economy by having some of these products and services in market, so allowing them to be able to test and learn and really adopt the new capabilities that we will have to support the Australian businesses.
And a big new capability coming off the pipeline next year with the go live of the confirmation of payee solution for NPP payments. So we're really excited that that's on track, and banks will start to roll that out through 2025. Mark, same question to you. How are you and your customers? Sorry, Matt, helping helping you work through that kind of change journey and engage in that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a point of view of our members, DSPANS runs a joint working group with AP Plus in order to educate our members on what the opportunities are, what the various services are, how they're used, use cases and stories. Each then member will then go and figure out what that means for their business and what that means for their customer base. And that will vary based on the scale, size and scope of those businesses. But it's absolutely about education. Right, and the other thing is that if we're engaged in consultations or other activities with government agencies and the like, it's about making sure that if the word payment comes up, we have the right people in the room to have a conversation about what the future of our payment system looks like, not what the past looks like.
And Katrina, same question for you.
So I think it's really about organisations thinking about the sequencing of activities and really starting those conversations now, to Matt's earlier point, because it's about thinking about what is the right pathway for different organisations. And I think it's really sort of starting that journey, talking to their banks, talking to their payment service provider, seeing what's available now, because a lot of capabilities out there, and we're already starting to see more organisations move payments across. But it's really, get started on the journey, I think would really be the kind of key message.
And there's been a couple of, we've woven in a couple of questions, but there's one question we haven't touched on, Katrina, and I might throw this one to you, which is about resiliency. There's a challenge because if a batch system doesn't work, does anybody notice? But one of the things about a 24/7 real-time system is that when there are issues around reliability, then people tend to notice that. So how is the NPP going in terms of reliability and resilience, and what are the things that we need to work on as an industry to address those issues?
Yeah, so obviously it's an incredibly important area as we think about more payments coming onto the NPP. I think the NPP was always designed to be highly resilient. The fact that it's a distributed architecture, so if one bank has issues, others can continue to operate. Some of the requirements we have in place for our participating financial institutions in terms of they're required to be up, sort of all the time except for 2 minutes a month, having sort of, backup sites to fall back to. But we really need to continue to work with the industry to see what more needs to be done as well as we think about this migration. But it's a really important area of focus because obviously it becomes much more apparent, as you say, Adrian, as we move more to a kind of digital payment world.
Lisa, closing observations, key takeaway from you?
Look, as Katrina said, it's about starting the journey. And I think, all things we'll say to our customers, it's about at least starting getting that planning process in place. For us as a industry party, our responsibility is continuing to build up that education, making sure as we think about our planning process in terms of our product roadmap and capability, we continue to provide those services. I think, if I look back, we really did think start real-time payments about the consumer, that peer-to-peer storyboard. Now it's really moving up, and as we're also getting dates to around, obviously, the decommissioning of checks as well. There are some real capabilities that provide genuine choice now to businesses about alternative ways to fulfill some of those historical use cases that supported cash and checks. And again, it's about exploration. So again, thinking about your business model, thinking about it in a future context, as Matt said, and then really starting to think about you've got more tools on the table now to be able to construct those opportunities to build your business out in a 2030 kind of context as opposed to a 1970s with our beloved direct entry system.
Thanks. Matt?
I think we've already said it, but start yesterday, and when you start exploring what you can do with NPP, don't start with the mindset of I'm replacing the old with the new. You're looking at those opportunities that create competitive advantage. That should be your starting point.
Excellent. Thank you, Katrina.
I would just stack on that. I think it's, looking at where are the areas of value that can be unlocked by utilising the NPP's capabilities and just get started on the journey. Absolutely.
Excellent. So thank you, Matt Lewis, Lisa Vasic and Katrina Stewart. That was a really great presentation, a really great panel. We're going to have a lot more of these. We're starting with a webinar in 2025 with a deep dive on the topic of payday super. What's the regulatory change? What's going to be expected from businesses? What will the benefits be for consumers? And how will the NPP play a role in helping to bring all of that together? We will be circulating the questions that we didn't get to in the link that we'll make available on our website. You are able to sign up for our Move to NPP newsletter using the link on our website, and you'll get regular updates on our program of work. And finally, if you're interested in starting to understand the journey around the opportunities that the NPP can bring you, then please talk to your bank or payment service provider. So that's all from us. Thanks very much.